Welcome to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein from Connecticut Capital. In this podcast, we help business owners and successful professionals plan for better wealth outcomes. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to help you identify better wealth decisions to help you achieve an unfettered life. It's time to ask yourself, what do you want more of?
Hello and welcome to Unfettered Wealth with Eric Tashlein. Eric, I'm so excited about today's topic.
Yeah, thank you. Me too, Eric. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I'm serious. For the listening audience, Eric sent me an outline of what he wants to talk about today, and this is just a beautiful, beautiful subject. How did you even come up with this? I mean, first of all, let's tell him what it is. You tell him what it is. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So I really had always wanted to write a book to my children because, we all have an expiration date. I'm hoping mine's when I'm in my 90s.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've had this awesome vantage point on people's lives over the last 30 something years. I just wanted to share it with my kids and maybe someday they'd share it with grandchildren. So it's kind of it's a book to my children and their children down the road.
Yeah. Again, just the concept is fantastic. I think that more people should do this. I have not done it. I would love it if my father would do it. Both my father and my mother are still alive, and so I would love them to write down some of their thoughts, some of their stories, because I don't want to lose those things.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, we all go through our lives, and I know, Eric, you've got 10 or 20 things. You're like, wow, it's invaluable advice to pass on, and we just don't, right? My mom, dad, my grandfather actually served on the Arizona in World War I. He joined at an early age. He was born in 1899. Wow. Joined at an early age and out of New York Harbor, took the ship out. I know nothing about it. Like those types of things drive me crazy. And in my case, I wasn't so cool to serve on a ship like the Arizona. Mm-hmm. But I've been doing financial planning and I've seen so many successes over the years and failures and not just from a financial standpoint, but family and career. And so there's some truths that I've picked up along the way. I just wanted to share with the listeners, and hopefully someday I'll actually put it into a little bit of a book format. But in the meanwhile, I had some good cliff notes I wanted to share.
All right, let's hear them.
Yeah, so I think some of the basics, right? So I hope my children, and I hope the listeners' children at a young age just start saving. And I think absolute truth is, you start out, you finish college, and you are given a job offer, and maybe it's $50,000 a year if you're lucky. I just would hope that my kids will take 10% of that, $5,000 a year, and put it into the 401k or to an IRA account, and they can blow the rest. I'd be fine with that, but just saving at a young age. I've just seen like the most successful people I've worked with saved early and as much as they possibly could. And when you hit your 30s, certainly you got to ramp it up a little bit. But I would say that combined with not getting into credit card debt and some bad habits is really powerful. And when I say bad habits, we all get into them, right? It's like every day I have to have an Americano coffee and it's $5, right? That's a crappy habit when you're 25.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing is that I think as fathers, you and I can both agree that a lot of these pieces of advice, we could look back and say, here's why I'm telling you this, because I didn't do this, right? In some of these cases, I wish I had been better at saving money when I was younger, because I would be in a much different position now. Not that I'm hurting by any means. I don't think you or I are hurting, and we're living better than a lot of Americans. However, we could, have much brighter future if we had done something different. And I can't speak for you, but I know that I'm, oh no, I definitely need that new camera because that'll capture the memories of the kids. And what's my budget for that? Oh, we could probably spend $200. And then we see a shiny $500 camera. That's the one we need.
Totally. Right.
It happens.
And so Eric, so many great points. And there's just so many, especially, from an early age, it's just so crucial. I remember, so my dad, I'd always hear him, he's kind of a gruff guy, blue collar guy, loved him. Tough man. And I'd hear him grumpily saying, did you change your oil? Right. And all the time. Right. And, how are your tires? Did you rotate them? And, but those are some smart things at an early age. If you end up buying a car, and hopefully it's a good used car, right, that's safe, just maintain your stuff. I see so many people that just let things go and they just don't maintain them. So please, kids, change your oil and Harry will be happy.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, make dad proud, please. I feel like everybody that I come across, 80% of the folks we talk to, finance is a real mystery. And I'm happy to be a mentor in that area and a guide, but I hope my kids, I hope the listeners' kids take a few finance courses in college or online or read some books at least.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not sure if you ever did when you were younger, but I know you have since.
Yeah. Here's the thing is that the advantage that all of you have that are younger than Eric and I is that if you want anything, it's at your fingertips, right? The internet is built for this purpose. In my opinion, it's built for this purpose, education, some entertainment, sure, but really you can find anything that you want to learn about on the internet. So if you're not in college or you're already done with college and you didn't take finance courses, just like Eric said, find something. There are books, there are online courses, there are YouTube people that are just willing to spend some time and teach you through videos. Get on it and just learn some things.
Yeah, that's true. But, at the same time, it's funny when I watch YouTube now, you and I both know it's like big hat, no cattle. Most of these people, like they're trying to, and we talked about that previously, with the interior, it's like a cardboard interior of a jet, right? They're selling the dream to you.
Yes.
And ultimately they're going to email you for a course on finance or something. Most of the YouTubers are kind of broke too, right? I would think.
Yeah. I think a lot of them are, especially they're using cardboard jets. Yeah. Influencers are not where it's at. Don't follow influencers. Find people that are actually professors and educators that are putting content on the internet because they've actually done it and they actually teach it. Not somebody who's in a cardboard jet saying you can live like I do. What, in a cardboard box? Come on.
Totally. That's awesome. So I would say too, what I've observed over the years, people that really do well at a high level, they read a lot or they listen to tons of podcasts. They're just curious souls. And even if you're not super curious, just make it a point of trying to read something new each week, learn new ideas. Because what I find that happens is when I have certain friends like this, they just read all the time, and I try to do the same thing as much as I can. But because of that knowledge, they can relate to everybody they run into, whether it's places that they've read about or gone to, or things or hobbies. It's just such a huge relationship builder. And, from an investment standpoint, just knowing what's happening in technology and some of these other areas, it's really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you listen to Warren Buffett is famous, and Ed Munger famous for their job. They read all day long, right? Mm-hmm. They're just trying to understand what's happening. And I heard a podcast recently. A gentleman had worked with Mark Zuckerberg, and he'd say, I'd walked by Mark's office, and, I don't know if he was writing pictures, but he was just reading books. He was writing down ideas and reading. And so there's definitely success leaves clues, right? I know Tony Robbins would always say that. And I think it's really true.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that I think a lot of people approach the world and their job and their career thinking, I've got to read educational material so I can come up with the next great idea. And if you read people who've had great ideas, you read biographies, you read, about people that have gone before you in your industry or industries that parallel yours, you will get ideas from them that you can then build on. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in a lot of cases. Just surround yourself with smarter people than you, and you'll become smarter. And even if you don't know them personally, when you dive into a book that has their knowledge, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, totally. And it doesn't have to be, some of this conversation today is going to be about business owners and so forth, but it could be like, so maybe you have interest in forensics as an example, and you're going to end up probably working for maybe a police department or the government. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be great at what you do, gosh, Dr. Henry Lee is right in Connecticut here, right? And so I'm sure he'd be quite flattered if a student reached out to him and said, I really admire your work. I'd love to know what you were thinking in this particular case and some suggestions you might have for me for the career, right? All these people are available, and maybe you strike out on occasion, but I'm sure they would provide some feedback.
Yeah, I would think so.
And so some things I'm going to reflect on here just for me, and which I think translate to my kids and our listeners' kids too. So some of the things I've learned over the years is from a business standpoint or goal setting standpoint, definitely around the holidays, sit down and if you want to be a good parent and a good business person, I would say kind of plan your year ahead. And one thing I'd always do is even if it would hurt, I would plan a couple vacations every year because if I didn't, I would work right past them.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yes.
I don't know if you found that, Eric.
Yes, absolutely true. And how many times have we turned around and said, wow, okay, wait a second, it's May? Where did February go? Right? I mean,
Totally.
time goes by so quickly. And when you're in the quote unquote grind, whether you're your own business owner or you're working for another company trying to build that company up or your employer, it just goes by too fast. So again, I think every old person says this, but it is 100% true. So start listening.
Yeah, no, totally. And you think about all the memories you would have missed out on if you didn't take a vacation. And I have to say, and I know it doesn't just hold true for me, when you're on vacation and you disconnect, you can see above the trees, right? And I think the best ideas I've ever had in my personal life or in my business life have been when I'm on vacation. And I don't know if it was the margaritas I had, but it was something.
I'm sure that contributed to it. It makes it pretty good.
And the other thing too is, I mean, as part of my career, I mean, over the years, and it hasn't happened recently, but I remember 10, 15 years ago when people were just hard charging until they were 70s in the business, I'd run across a lot of older gents that were like, yeah, my kids don't talk to me. I was never there for them. Right. So it's really important, I think, ultimately, in terms of your, setting some goals and planning, just make sure you incorporate your family there, even during that period where you have to grind in your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I also wanted to talk about, it's funny, my wife and I were having a conversation with our oldest daughter the other day, and you know what, end up getting a job with good benefits, right? And I think that's the traditional path for most people. But I have a different look at it. These days, I think in some capacity, being self-employed can be at certain times a little less risky. You kind of control your own destiny. It doesn't mean you won't fail doing it. But I would say if you're in your 20s to 30s, if you have an idea, it's the best time to take some risk with your life because you don't have a mortgage, you don't have college tuitions and so forth. So just something to keep in mind. And if you do get into forensics as an example, and you have, let's say, a passion for photography, maybe you're doing a little bit of a side hustle so you can afford some vacations that otherwise you couldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always something else out there. There's, you bring up side hustles. You can turn a hobby, just like you said, into a side hustle. You can turn a hobby into something that also gets you, a little bit of pay here and there, a little bit of fun money, maybe. A great way to help balance out the work that you're doing is that, like you said, while you don't have the major bills, be saving. Make sure you're setting that savings away. And if that takes you just to your last dollar every month, so be it. That's fine. You're doing the right thing by saving, but then you can create those little side hustles here and there just to earn a little extra fun money and count on that. So it's what you want to put into it. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and along the lines of saving, I've heard savings referred to as your employees or your soldiers, right? So there's a certain crossover point. You're saving along the way, and you're building your workforce in a sense, and there's some dividends being kicked off from the stock. And at a certain point, it's just so cool when you see it. When those dividends get to the point where people are like, wow, you know what? I could think about a career change because of that extra income coming in or because of that side hustle. So it just gives you greater opportunities to take some risks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of things, it's fine. I remember being in college and I grew up in this blue collar family. We were not goal oriented. I didn't even know what college was hardly back then. But I was motivated because I grew up without a lot. And a couple of my all time favorite quotes, which I think translate to everybody, Robert Frost, Teddy Roosevelt. And Robert he's like, two roads diverge in a wood, and I've taken the road less traveled, and it made all the difference. And I'm like, wow, that is just so true in life and business. Even today, when I think about that quote, right? I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that one.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's what I would love to say I've done, but I will be honest, and fear has kept me from going into that darker path, the one that's less traveled, that's a little rougher, and you don't know exactly all the bends and things like that. I've done it sometimes, and I would agree. It turns out really well, and it's a more adventurous life, but there have been times when I've shied away from it because of fear, and I kind of have that regret that I didn't.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think that's true most of the time, right? It's just like it is fear. It causes fear, right? And the unknown. Nobody loves the unknown. And I know your situation and I know your path. And based on our recent conversations, you're doing great. I understand the fear. Sometimes you just have to feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Yep.
And so hopefully after this, you're so motivated, you go out and take those next steps.
I'm gonna, absolutely. We'll talk about that on another podcast.
Totally. I want to hear that.
Yeah.
But I know you're doing well, but I know that there's some big stretch goals that you have, like we all do, that it's scary when you have kids. So I get it.
I love that you just said that, because I know that this is something that you've talked to your kids about. Is you said the term stretch goals, and I think that that's exactly what parents need to help their kids understand what that means. And a goal is a big deal, but if you make goals that are really easily hit, you really never challenge yourself, and the growth just doesn't happen. So when you do incorporate a stretch goal, something that you really have to kind of reach for, that you maybe uncomfortably reach for sometimes, the payoff is huge.
Yeah, and you find things in yourself you never thought were there. Yeah. Maybe you suspected were there, but it's cool. And all that, those little successes or bigger goal hits, beget more success, right? You end up, your confidence grows. I think your opportunities grow. I think through work, you end up growing. I think luck is part of all of what we do, right? But I think your chances of finding luck increase as you do those things. Yeah. The other quote I love is Teddy Roosevelt, and the warrior in the ring, whether it's a man or woman, in the arena, the face is marred with dust, sweat, and blood. Who maybe they fall short, but they understand the enthusiasm and the devotion, right? And in the end, they in the quote it says either find triumph or fall short, but they did so daring greatly. You just don't want to look back on your life and say, "Gosh, I was in that large pack of timid souls who never gave it a shot," right? You need to be all in, and you do need to take some risks, however you define that within your own lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
No question there. And in terms of businesses, we talked about it before. If my kids, I've seen some cool situations where I would say throughout my children's lives and clients' lives, in everybody's life, you're going to have a few opportunities that are going to pop up, and I'll call them flyers, or we talked about Shark Tank a previous podcast ago, and you may get one or two, and I would encourage, if the cool thing about savings is maybe you've amassed some extra money, you're like, gosh, you know what, I can take a flyer here, only put in what you are willing to lose, right? Because only 1 out of 10 of these things ever work out. But if you have a friend who's smart and motivated, maybe they've had some success in the past, maybe you take 10 grand, you sink it into that person's business, and hopefully it pays off. And I've seen it happen in client situations over the years, and sometimes it ends up being worth more longer term than their investments. And I think it's worth a shot. I mean, it's more risky than a football bet, but I think it's worth a shot. And the only way you can do it is if you save.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last thing I want to say about that is, the most important thing, if you're going to do that, take a flyer with somebody, is the person behind the company, right? It's great to understand it. Is it a technology company? Is it science-based? Is it making sales? But really it's the person. And then I would say also, if you have 10 grand to invest, spend $1,000 and use a good attorney before you do it, because I think people go into business relationships sometime and they don't eyeball things enough. So just be smart about those things for sure.
Yep.
The other thing too is I talk about passion, right? I mean, I love people that are all in. My wife is one of those people. Like, she, as a mom, she's all in. In her careers, a couple of careers she's had, she's been all in at the gym, as a spouse, with her friends. So she's just there and present and high energy. And I think about guys like Rudy, the undersized walk-on at Notre Dame, who is famous for being gritty and taking on, I mean, I don't know how much he weighed, but it was probably half of what a typical 300-pound Notre Dame lineman was. And he'd go at them with the heart of a lion, and he's famous for it, right? And there's just so many other examples. I'm sure you have some too, Eric, right?
Yeah, it just, again, I got to say this quote because it makes me laugh, but Mike Tyson, right? One of his quotes is, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. Right?
Totally.
We go in with a plan. Well, Rudy, like your example, he went in with a plan, but I think he also planned to get hit in the face. You know, he knew the game he was playing. And I'm not just talking about football. This is called life, right?
Yeah.
No, you know, you talked about goal setting earlier, and we've seen these underdogs time and time again get knocked down and get back up because they did continue to have that plan. And I think that's what we all need to plan for, whether, like you brought up, you know, starting a business or investing in somebody else. Understand that you may get hit in the face. You may fall down, but have a plan to get back up again and brush it off and say, well, I knew that was part of the game, you know, but I'm going to keep going. So any of the underdog stories are fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My favorite one, I watched USA Hockey beat the Russian team and, you know, from the Olympics back in the 80s the other week. It's just so inspiring, right? So the underdogs. So, and the other thing too, you know, everybody talks about, which drives me a little crazy today, but I get it. You know, they talk about having balance. And I do think when you're in your 20s or 30s, you're learning and you're earning, and you have to work your butt off. And hopefully, you know, you crest that hill where you can have more balance in your life. But I know everybody likes to talk balance, but you have to get off the couch at some point and work.
Yeah.
So I would say, I hope for my kids that, you know, I would say when you hit your 40s and beyond, you know, your energy level decreases. You have children, well, maybe, and more responsibility. So, you know, work hard, you know, I would say the first few decades. And I think that really does pay off. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked a little about goals. I mean, we're boaters. So, you know, you have a ship, you have a steering wheel, set a destination and head towards it, use your radar. You know, it's almost like the airplane pilot, right? If I'm going from New York to LA, I mean, they're making calculations along the way. They're skirting storms to get to that end goal. So again, you just make sure you're active in that goal setting. The other thing too is, I mean, listen, I was making fun of balance earlier, but I'm aware of the mindfulness trend. I've read on it. I accept it. I think it makes sense. And for my children and for listeners' children, I mean, we all have a spirit, right? And in my mind, you know, the spirit is connection to who you really are and a higher power, in my opinion. And so when you feel in the zone and you're happy and you have experienced something called flow, right? Where you're just in this amazing zone where everything's going real well. To me, that is a reflection of your spirit, things you should be doing more in your life. So I would just say, as you do all your goal setting and you're working hard, don't deny your spirit. I mean, if you feel amazing when you're snorkeling, or if you're with friends having a glass of wine, don't deny that, right? I would just say, what makes you feel good, and do more of that and incorporate that into your business life. Yeah. And even though you might have to work longer than you'd like for the first 10 years out of the gate. So, you know, the other thing too, I think in life is the people that I love the most and the people that I admire the most, just they say please and thank you like you learn in kindergarten. And I think that goes a long way. I mean, when we're out of country, I try to learn the other language and to be able to say please and thank you. I think it's so respectful. I think with that, you're honoring the presence of others. And, you know, you think about some of the greatest people of all time, right? Gandhi, Jesus, Mother Teresa, like they were not judgmental. And I try not to be. I think all of us are to a degree. I'm guilty of it. But I would just say something I've learned that I feel good about is when I'm walking down the street, I may see somebody less fortunate or different than me. I nod my head and I just want to acknowledge, and I hope my kids do too, acknowledge their existence. Yeah. People need that today, I think, more than ever. And I hope my kids are respectful in that way as they go through life. Yeah. Yep. And I think that statement is so powerful because when you do see somebody less fortunate, a lot of tendency is to avert eyes because they're going to want something from me. And I think what they want more than anything is acknowledgement that they're there. And so I agree with you 100% that
I don't always have extra money on me to give to somebody who may need it. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I give it. Sometimes I don't. It just depends on what I'm doing, where my brain's at. But at the very least, I try to remind myself to smile, say hi, something, just so they know that they're a human being, right? Just as I am.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to be a sucker. I mean, sometimes when I do that, all of a sudden, like there's a handout in front of me and I don't give money to it's funny, the local shelter, and I've served food there for years. And they're saying, do not give money out because it usually is going towards bad habits, right? But, give to, the food pantries or what have you, or buy them a bus ticket.
Yep.
Have a bus ticket ready, which I think makes sense, and or maybe a food coupon.
Yep,
or something
gift cards.
Like that.
Yep, like
gift
McDonald's
cards.
gift card or Burger King gift card, something like that. That's an easy $5 purchase. You can get a few of those, stick them in your wallet, and that's something that they can use, right? And it's not something that's easily sellable, to pay for a different habit.
Yeah, along that line, I mean, I ran into a business person the other day who was really active, exceptional business person back in the day, and has had some health problems and had retired probably for like the last 10 years. And I make it a point when I see that individual now, I'll go over and talk to them, and because I think for him, I think he probably realizes that he's on a downslope here, and I think he really appreciates when I come over and pay him the same respect that he used to garner when he was a lion as a businessman. So that makes me feel good whenever I see him to pay attention to. That's him. Awesome. I hope my kids do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other things too. I think one thing that I don't give myself a lot of credit for many things, but maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I think I've been lucky. I think there's been a lot of people that have helped me over the years, and sometimes I've failed to recognize that. But one thing I do think is so important is just to learn to read people. I feel like that's such a good trait. I've definitely averted my way around people that I'm so glad I did in my younger life, for sure, in terms of making choices. And like at work, even to today, if I'm struggling with communication with somebody, or if our team is, or if they're just rude to staff, right, we will just decline to work with that person. And it could be a great person, but if the communication's not there, you need to learn to read, because life's too short, especially if you're going to be in a 10 or 20-year relationship like we are oftentimes in this business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, some more thoughts for my kids. Definitely be a great friend to your friends. Like, if you're going to have friends, pay attention. You have to keep making deposits into that relationship. You can't just keep making withdrawals. And
absolutely,
right? I mean, Eric, I'm sure you have those friends where you might reach out and make a phone call, and they talk for 95% of the time. And to me, they're being a bad friend, right? It should be 50-50 at least. And I would say be there for loved ones whenever possible. I mean, I don't know, this is a little hokey, I guess, but I'll even stop by grave sites of some of my ancestors and just be like, thank you for your sacrifices, because I know they work so hard so that my grandparents and, my parents, and ultimately my parents' children, myself, my sister, could do better than they did. And so just to honor that. And I think that's just a great tradition to think about, as we go forward. The other thing too, which again, this is not something I came up with, but I believe it to be true. We are the 5 people we choose to associate with, right, in our lives. And I think it's so important to recognize and, be with people, your best friend should be people that you really respect and admire, and that treat you well as well, and make you a better person, right? So I hope my kids do that, and especially when they decide on spouses as well, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I look at my wife, and I am definitely a better person with her. Her family is just so much fun, and she's everything that I could ever ask for in a spouse. So I got lucky there, and I hope my kids do that. And I know it sounds like in your case you also have that, so that's great.
I do. I'm blessed, and I hope your wife listens to this, because that's fantastic.
Buying with a spouse, and I've said this one before, but this is so true. So my wife and I, because I grew up not a ton of money in the house. All my friends' families were pretty successful. I'm like, gosh, I kind of live in a dump. you know, but we were happy. We just didn't know we didn't have a lot of money. But so I saved out of the gate, and part of it was my dad. My dad really got into investing later on in life, and he was always sharing his money magazine with me and giving ideas. And he got gung ho, and actually was able to retire early. One thing we did was we bought a house that we could both afford by ourselves, and we banked my wife's salary for 4 or 5 years. Then we tried to have kids, and it's a good thing that we did, because some of that ended up going into these very expensive medical treatments, infertility treatments or what have you. So that was something like I just thought I was going to go to college, but I'm like, gosh, I can't even have a kid.
Yeah.
So it went into medical treatment, and so thank God that we saved early. So just something to think about. And the only reason we could save was because we bought a 2-family house initially.
Yeah,
We had it.
That's amazing advice. And I to be quite honest, I've never heard that before. As far as being able to buy it with one person's salary, and the problem is when you go to a realtor, not a knock on realtors, but most of the time it's, okay, what do you guys make? Let's take a look at your finances, so on and so forth. Here's the house you can afford. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can afford a $230,000 house, or we can afford a $230,000 house, but they're taking both salaries into account, and they're going to try to sell you the house, the best house you can get. But man, what do you need, right? That's that back to that want versus need thing. That's amazing advice, because if we had done that, my wife and I, if we had done that early, it would have been it would have made a big difference. Number one, we wouldn't have had as large of a house, which then you have to fill with stuff, right? So then you're spending more money to fill that house. So it's just kind of a bad ongoing issue that your finances seem to escape you very quickly when you have a much larger house to fill.
Totally. I totally agree.
Yeah.
The other thing too, and we're all kind of guilty. I mean, at least I'm guilty of it too. I think I see the younger generations is just buying things, that you're like, oh, this is cool. It's like the coolness factor. Oh, it's impressive. I don't really do it much at all, but I have at times. So and I didn't really. One thing I did do, I try not to buy any toys until I could really afford them. I see a lot of young folks that'll just. Do you really need a convertible BMW when you just got out of college? Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And I think if you're going to do that, I think the way to do that, and I hope my kids do that, is that, listen, you get your 50,000 salary, you save, you have a rental, and then, hopefully if you're saving, or you have a little side gig and you're creating some income from that, maybe you buy a rental property and you're clearing $400 or $500 a month. Well, then maybe you use some of that to buy a more expensive car than you would have, right? Yeah. I'm okay with that, as long as you're using the investments to pay for some of the toys.
Priorities first. Yep.
Priorities first. And the couple things that I learned recently. Billionaire Howard Marks, he's really cool. I mean, if you ever get a chance to listen to him, but yeah, he's got a healthy ego in finance. I mean, I think we're all opinionated. I think I was more so when I was younger, which is pretty typical. But I think as you get older, you learn all the things you don't know. He'll always ask himself, he'll say, wow, he'll hear another opinion. And at first he'll discount it, and he'll struggle with this thought, though. He'll say, well, you know what? Maybe he or she is right. And I love that, right? Because it just lets you take a step back and think, right? So what's the outcome if that other person is right?
Yeah.
And kind of lets you plan accordingly. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. That's one to learn early for sure.
Yeah. So a couple other things too, as we're getting towards the round in the corner here. So we had talked about my dad, Harry, earlier. By the way, my mom, Dorothy, was an awesome mom. She was like, she was just amazing. She just never stopped cleaning and picking up after, like as kids now, as adults, I'm like, gosh, I really should have helped out my mom more. She's just this amazing force of nature when it came to keeping the house in order and all that. So I miss them both. They're both gone. So my dad was not the most affectionate man, but on days that I stayed home with a fever, I was sick, I remember having chicken pox, he would come home from work and check on me and bring me comic books. And to me, I grew up in a family, very seldom do I hear, I love you, and give me a big hug. But we were not a hugging family, very kind of Germanic. But that spoke volumes to me because he cared about me. And I hope my kids do the same thing. I would bring them wedding magazines and books and preteen mags. And I hope it speaks volumes to them too, because they are definitely the most amazing things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah,
for sure. Girls, also, I just go through life with some gratitude and say thank you. I had read a Harvard report recently, and I thought it was really interesting. There's a 30-year-old profession that sent out 30 letters to colleagues and mentors who had made a big difference in her life and career. And as part of those letters, she gave specific examples to those recipients about how grateful she was to them. And could you imagine if you were a recipient to one of those letters, how good you would feel?
Yeah. Just out of the blue, having someone do that would mean a lot, I think, to anybody.
Totally. And so I hope my kids do, and they're good kids. Just take time to say thank you, and they do. They say thank you notes, and they're good kids. So say thanks, live life with gratitude in your hearts. Just found good people to be around, and ultimately, and I think they know this because we try to be a good tight knit family. Is happiness in life, from what we've found anyways, just having love for others, being a great friend and family member, and being empathetic and kind. So to my girls, I love you both. And to Eric, thank you so much for letting me share some of these thoughts. They're still a work in progress, but wanted to get some of these thoughts out to my children. And it's not because my health's changed. I ran a 7.5 minute mile this morning, I'll have you know.
Hey, there you go. All right.
Pretty good for an old fat guy.
Yeah. Well, Eric, I want to thank you for letting me be just a small part of this and just kind of bouncing back and forth with you on this subject. As fathers, you and I have had many conversations offline. My last parting words on this podcast are this. To all the children out there, especially Eric's kids, as you listen to this, hug your parents. Hug your parents. While you can, hug your parents. Give your dad a big squeeze. For all of us listeners, for me specifically, squeeze your dad for me, would you? All right. Eric, again, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I think it was amazing content. And to our listeners, of course, we thank you for tuning in and listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Eric comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at Connecticut Capital Management Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Connecticut Capital. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. Content should not be construed as personalized investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your advisor, attorney, or tax advisor in regards to your individual situation. Eric Tashlein is an investment advisory representative of Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, and Connecticut Benefits Group, LLC are not affiliated.